Darkness and horror games are one of the most iconic combos in history. Like, has there ever been a horror game that hasn't used darkness as a scare element before in some way, shape, or form? I honestly can't think of one. It's a safe, tried and tested trope that always makes an experience just that much more scary. Until it doesn't, of course. With our modern perception of games, darkness just doesn't have that be-all scare factor that it once used to. But about a decade ago, that's all we saw, with the likes of Slender and all those old Unity games taking advantage of the unknown factor of darkness to deliver some actually pretty good tension. However, looking back at those games now, you don't feel the same level of intensity that you once did. The dark just doesn't deliver the terror or suspense that it once used to, even though nothing has changed. Why is that? Have we been spoiled with these new titles that the fear of the dark just doesn't work on us anymore? Or was there a fundamental issue with how these games used the dark in the first place? I'm here to argue the latter. I believe it isn't just a lack of light, it's how it's used. I believe darkness in horror games is still extremely reliable and a good mechanic if done right. However, doing so does take some effort. One of the main things is making sure the darkness has meaning. Well, yes, the atmosphere of the dark heightens our senses, overusing it kind of just does the exact opposite. It gives the feeling of waiting for something to appear. At first, it will work, tension will build. However, if not used sparingly, it actually does the exact opposite, becoming a backdrop, something that doesn't actually add to the gameplay. This exact problem happens in the original Slender. At first, the darkness and fog around you builds tension. Your subconscious mind is telling you that something could be out there, watching you. And your only chance of knowing is in the hands of a flimsy flashlight. A very tense and fear-building situation. But as soon as you finish that initial playthrough, all that fear and anticipation goes away completely. You already know the darkness isn't actually hiding anything, and whatever is out there would make itself known long before you spot it. It's just there for background noise, and a cheap way to get you scared. And this isn't just for old games. This same example can be seen today for a large number of those new indie horror games. It's a very small but impactful mistake that a lot of these games do, is to just throw a layer of darkness over everything. Every step you take from beginning to end is through darkness. Like, sure, every once in a while they may use this to get a cheap scare because you weren't able to see something until it was right in front of you, but because you were entrenched in darkness the whole time, the specific fear of the dark just isn't there anymore. You become almost bored of it. And don't get me wrong, having your character walk through a dark area with only a flashlight can indeed work very well in some cases, but it must have a purpose besides that. This exact spot is where these games fall short, especially in these indie titles. They rely on the dark as just a constant. Something that will be there just to make the game more scary, because it's there. But without any gameplay changes or threat to the player, it's honestly just becomes mundane. But when darkness actually feels alive and interacts with the player in a way that will keep them on edge, it's a very powerful tool. A game that does a good job of this, actually, is the original Amnesia. In Amnesia, the dark actually affects you physically, causing your sanity to drain while you're in it. It gives inherent meaning to darkness, and makes you have a physical fear of it because the darkness is your enemy. Instead of just keeping it in the back of your mind, you now have to be fully aware of it. And with the addition of tinderboxes, it's also a feature that you have to make sacrifices for. This meaningful interaction is what gives it weight and allows it to stand out instead of just being part of the background. It's unique. And this uniqueness is also why darkness works so well as an outlier. Having it be an outlier causes it to have much more impact on the player's experience than it would have had as a simple layer. The player should feel a distinct tone shift if used correctly and have to wonder what they're getting themselves into. Some perfect examples of this would be the dark water scene in Resident Evil 7 or the lighting the candle in Aoni. Actually, speaking of Aoni, this game has one of my favorite uses for dark gameplay. They throw you into short, tense, total darkness situations repeatedly. Each time you walk into these areas, you feel as if something is just going to pop out at you, but it never happens. In fact, it takes advantage of the exact issue I mentioned earlier, using a situation often enough to the point where the player just becomes numb to it. And when the player finally lets their guard down, something does happen. It catches you completely off guard and hits just that much harder because of everything that led up to it. And this still holds up extremely well even today. So we aren't immune to darkness just yet, it just needs purpose. We've just gotten used to the lazy version of it, with no real meaning. But with intention, weight, risk, and consequence, it can still be one of our most primal fears. And with modern games such as the Iron Lung or Amnesia the Bunker, they've shown that you can still use darkness in original and impactful ways that give us this inherent fear. There still is hope. The dark is still something that causes fear in all of us. It just needs to have purpose behind it. I hope you guys enjoyed that little look into a topic I found interesting. If so, please leave a like and subscribe, as it helps way more than you can ever imagine. Comment any ideas you might want to see in the future. I have a decent little list that I've been working on, and hopefully we'll get that out pretty soon. So yeah, hope you guys have a good rest of your day. See y'all.